wonderful to see you. You're looking particularly smiley today, I'm glad to say. Well, welcome to my show. I'm really, really pleased to have you all here. My name is Helena Handbasket, and I've just flown over from, well, here it is. I've just flown over from my hometown of Las Vegas, which is obviously the most fabulous place in the world, where all the fabulous people live. And I was there in my penthouse suite, and I got a little call from your cheeky President Cameron. He phoned me up. He was on the phone. He said, Helena, I need you. And I said, David, I hear that all the time, man. I mean, what makes you special? He said, Helena, we need help. If everybody goes on consuming the way you do in America, he's talking about me, we're going to need 5 Earths. And you know what? We've only got one. He said, look, there's environmental problems, we've got social problems, the economy's on the brink of collapse. We've got to sort out the way we live our lives. We've got to sort out our consumption and our lifestyles. Now, when President Cameron's talking about my shopping habits, I stop and I pay attention. So I said, David, I'll do my best. I'm the queen of consumption. Sustainability, not so much. But I know a few people who are, who've got plenty to say about sustainable consumption. So, if you'd like to meet them, I have 4 very close friends that I'd like to invite onto my show to tell us a little bit more about sustainable consumption, so that we can go back to President Cameron and give him some top tips for how to solve the problem. Would you like to meet them? Yeah. Oh, brilliant! Woo! I thought you would. Fantastic. Okay, in that case then, please, will it... Actually, President Cameron said one more thing to me. He said, Helena, if we don't change our ways, we're only going in one direction. Oh. I said, which way is that, David? He said, we're going to hell in a handbasket. Did you get it? Get it? Yeah. Sarah, this one's for you. It's only Americans that get that joke. Anyway, so let's put our hands together and let's meet our first guest, Rational Choice Theory.
Hello, I'm Rational Choice Theory. I think about the way that people make decisions through weighing up the costs and the benefits of different courses of action. Thinking about the information that people need to make better, more rational choices, as well as getting the price right, is all we need to do to make a more sustainable world. It really is that simple.
Thank you, Rational Choice Theory. Lovely to have you on the show. Now, our second guest today is social psychology.
Hi guys, I'm social psychology. I'm a real people person, and I believe that to make sustainable consumption work, what we need to do is understand what makes people tick, what their identities are, what their unconscious needs are, and tap into that. It's not about making them understand the facts, but we can change their behaviours in other ways.
Fantastic social psychology. Lovely to see you. Okay, so there's our first 2 guests. Number 3 coming through the door is social practice theory.
Hiya, hi. My name's social practice theory, and I think that the reason people consume is to do things, to do a range of perfectly normal things like travelling, cooking, showering, and so on. So the reason we consume unsustainably is that these practices have evolved in more and more resource-intensive directions. So if we want to solve the problem of unsustainable consumption, we need to think about those practices, how they evolve and change, and try and steer them into more sustainable directions. And that's what I'm really looking forward to telling you more about in the rest of this performance.
Lovely. Social practice theory. Thank you. Nice headwear. I hope we'll be hearing a little bit more about that later on. So last but not least, I'd like to introduce our 4th guest, systems of provision theory.
Good afternoon. My name is Systems of Provision Theory, and I am interested in the bigger picture. I believe that consumption is shaped heavily by the systems that meet our everyday needs, such as energy, agriculture and water. These systems are complicated, intertwined and difficult for any individual actor to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Systems of Provision. So, what a fine foursome we have, eh? Impressive, I think. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of them a little bit better. Are you? Yeah. Okay, so let's start out, I think, with rational choice theory. Rational choice theory, would you please take the hot spot? And your specialist subject?
Myself, rational choice theory.
Rational choice theory, your 2-minute quick-fire round on your specialist subject of yourself begins now. Why do we have a problem? Why are we consuming unsustainably?
Well, as I said, Helena, it really is quite simple. I mean, we have really great environmental science like this institution here. This university, this school has produced great understanding of the environmental problems that are happening in the world around climate change and biodiversity and deforestation. This means that we have to have sustainable consumption, but the problem is people out there in the world, the general public, are completely ignorant to these facts. They really don't understand the basic science here. And also, there's another factor here, which is that people out there in the world, when they're making their decisions, don't factor in the environment into the decisions that they're making in their daily lives. Things like deforestation, as I mentioned, we would call these things externalities.
Okay, then, rational choice theory. So how should we go about promoting sustainable consumption?
Well, yes, as I say, it's very simple, isn't it? I mean, really, all we need to do is get the information out there. We need to get it out there quicker, faster, and more effectively, so people can actually have the information that allows them to change their lives. Also, as I say, we need to get the price right. Okay,
have you got some concrete examples you could tell me?
Well, yes. I think on the information side, we've seen lots of great information campaigns from the government, like Are You Doing Your Bit? And throughout the past 2 decades, and that's getting the information out slowly but surely. We also see things like white goods and putting labelling on white goods, which has really improved things there. Putting a tax on plastic bags. You'll all be aware that we've just put the bag tax throughout the UK, so my friend David Cameron's really pushed this forward, and we see that people are using less plastic bags. So if we get the price right, it works. We know that if the price of energy goes up, consumption goes down. As I say, really, really simple. We don't need to overcomplicate these matters.
It does sound very simple. Oh, and we're out of time, but rational choice theory, I'm pleased to say, on your specialist subject round of yourself, you have scored full marks. Very well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's have a look at our second contestant. Onto the hot spot, if you would, please, social psychology. And your specialist subject?
Me, social psychology.
Social psychology, thank you. Your 2-minute quickfire round on your specialist subject of yourself begins now. Why do we have a problem with consumption?
Well, actually, what I believe drives people consumption is their social context, their understanding of their own identities, and their unconscious needs. And this is what marketing companies and people like Coca-Cola and Apple, they get into that really well. They tap into that, and they can persuade people to consume more and to consume in unsustainable ways.
So in that case, what do we do? How do we promote sustainable consumption?
Well, we can use some of these techniques, these social marketing techniques that have been developed by these companies, but for good. So we can understand how to tap into these behaviours and unconscious needs. It's not about giving them the facts, but it's about understanding why people behave in the way they do. So they're influenced by their peers and their friends. They want to seem cool. They just want to fit in with a group, and they want to express themselves. And we can help them do that in a more sustainable way.
That certainly sounds like a lot of fun. Have you got some examples?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked, Helena, because I brought this bag along to show you all, because actually what happened was, first, my friend Tracy had this bag, and she was telling me about it, that she gets her fruit and veg from Riverford Whole Foods, and they're organic, they're very sustainable, it's a very good way of getting your veg. And she said that she would never be seen dead shopping in Waitrose or Tesco's anymore for her fruit and veg. So then I went home and I said to my husband that we really ought to get into this Riverford Whole Foods scheme now. So now we're subscribing to that, and they gave us a bag after a few months. So now I can show other people that I'm using this. And then my friend Suzanne was asking about it, and I had to tell her.
So social psychology,
everything.
is it very important to you that people see you with this bag?
Oh, absolutely. It shows to other people that I'm not the kind of person that's going to go down to Waitrose to get my fruit and veg, but actually I'm consuming in a different way now.
Interesting. And what do your other friends think about it?
Well, as I said, my friend Suzanne has now started to think about it. So yeah, we all think it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool indeed. Thank you, social psychology. On your specialist subject round, you've scored full marks. Thank you. Okay, so it's time to hear from, I barely dare ask, but social practice theory, would you please take the hot spot? And your specialist subject, please?
Myself.
Social practice theory. Your 2-minute quickfire round on your specialist subject of yourself begins now. Why are we consuming unsustainably?
Well, people consume in order to do a range of perfectly normal things, like travel, shower, cook food, and so on and so forth. And those social practices, like cooking or driving or so on, have all evolved in ways that are increasingly resource intensive. If you think about, for example, laundry, once upon a time we might have washed our clothes in the river and they wouldn't have many clothes in the first place. Now we have hot water and electricity piped into our homes, and we have large appliances like washing machines and tumble dryers that consume vast amounts of resources just so our clothes can look clean. So we consume unsustainably because the practices that we do just to be normal people involve more and more use of resources.
Okay, so that's how we've got to where we are now. How do we get to a more sustainable consumption future?
Well, there's an awful lot going on here. Practices are changing all of the time, and lots of different things are influencing those changes. If you just think about that transition I mentioned a moment ago in laundry, loads of different actors have been involved in that process. People who design washing machines, who design clothes, who design adverts to make us think we need to have whiter than white clothes all the time, and so on and so forth. If we want to change the trajectory of these practices, we have to get all of these people together to think about where they're going, where they're headed, and what sort of influences actually change the direction of those practices. It's only with all of these things together that we will actually make a difference.
Okay, so can you give me some examples of the kinds of interventions that you might make then?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Helen. There's not actually, I wouldn't say, any practical, practice-informed examples here, but people are intervening in practice all the time in countless different ways. We can do things like change what practices are made up of, the elements of practice. For example, cars are getting more efficient, more and more roads are being laid, tips are being given out on eco-driving. In the Dutch driving test, for example, people are even tested on their hypermiling skills. So there's ways in which that driving as a practice is being changed. And in some ways it's being made more sustainable, in other ways it's being made less sustainable. But these are all practical interventions in practices. We need to apply similar kinds of understandings to think about how other practices evolve and change.
Thank you, that's very interesting. May I ask you while we're here about your lovely tiara?
Well, I'm glad you noticed. I did spend a lot of time investing in it. Practices are made up of different elements, images, skills and stuff. So, for example, football, we have images of what it means to win a game, stuff, goals, a ball itself, and skills like the ability to run, kick, dribble, and so on. So these 3 balls on my head, on my tiara, represent the elements of practice.
I shall certainly always associate you with balls in the future.
Thank you very much.
And you scored full marks. Thank you very much. Okay, so only one more contestant to go. Let's see how systems of provision theory does. Would you like to take the hot spot? And your specialist subject?
Yes, it's myself, yes.
Thank you. Systems of provision theory, your 2-minute quickfire round on your specialist subject of yourself begins now. Why are we consuming unsustainably?
Well, as I said in my preamble, the fundamental problem with unsustainable consumption is the systems which provide our everyday needs. These systems are both material, they're made of wood, metal, plastic, wires, pipes, but they're also social, made of knowledge, rules, institutions, and they are very difficult to change. We have what we call lock-in, where we get locked into particular trajectories. So I will give you an example. The QWERTY keyboard is by far no means the most efficient keyboard, but it is the one that has become most conventionally used by everyone. I myself prefer the Optimus Maximus, 2 hands apart, but most of you will still be QWERTYs. This is the problem. We have path dependency with technologies, and this becomes very difficult to change. We do not use fossil fuels because we want to, it's because they underpin the many different facets of our everyday lives.
Okay, so then how do we consume more sustainably? How would you promote sustainable consumption?
Well, there's 2 main ways I think that we can do this. One is through experimentation with new technologies. Nanotechnology, renewables, all these really exciting new materials like graphene and quaganglin, and many other things that we can go. And we experiment, we support these experiments, and some of these technologies will diffuse and will scale up and have a transformative effect. But we can also look to intervene in the existing systems through policies and regulations, things like banning incandescent light bulbs, or just tweaking the system here or there. And that can still have some kind of effect.
That sounds good then. Can you give me some examples of how you've been put into practice?
Yes, actually, just today, the Moroccan government have announced a huge solar concentrated power plant in the desert, which they hope by 2020 will provide half the power from the country. And the first phase of that, 500,000 panels, is going on stream in a month or 2. That's a really good example of large-scale systemic change. It's not about influencing individuals, it's about big technology, and getting out there. And yes, that would be a good example.
Thank you very much. Systems of Provision Theory, full marks to you. Very well done. Well, some interesting viewpoints here, some very different perspectives I'm sensing between our panellists. I think what will be most interesting, though, is when we pit them head to head and see how they get to grips with each other, don't you? Yes. Okay, in that case, let's go to our question time round. Fantastic. So, let me just see if I've understood you right then. It sounds to me as though you two are very much looking at changing what individuals do. You're looking at poking and prodding and tweaking and persuading people to behave differently by fair means or foul, I might add. Would you agree, generally speaking?
Yeah.
You're looking at individuals. Whereas over on this side of the room, I'm seeing a much, much bigger picture, and not just because of systems of provision's big glasses here. But you seem to be dealing with things beyond the individual, with social forces, with structures, with pipes and tubes and regulations, and massive cultural trends. Is that reasonably right?
Yes,
broadly.
Are you broadly friends, you two?
Similar-ish.
Yeah, similar-ish?
It's a bit boring.
Yes, very well.
You're quite pally, you two, aren't you? I've heard. And what do you think? We'll maybe look across the table in a moment. But anyway, let us not forget why we're here. We're here to get some top tips on sustainable consumption for President Cameron. Well, the table's yours. Do you have any top tips? Do you have any track record of working with government?
Yes, we've got quite a lot actually. And as I was saying to Amber Rudd, the Department of Energy Secretary, my friend, last night when we were meeting over drinks, I'm very pleased with the kind of track record that we have, doing a lot of work with DEC and with DEFRA over the last few years.
Okay, and
Well, exactly. I mean, as rational choice theory, I think I'm the most experienced at informing government. I've been in the centre of power and calculation informing government for over 3 decades now. And you'll find that a lot of the sorts of things that I would advocate are being led out and done by government around information campaigns, and also the pricing kind of things that I mentioned earlier. Really, the key thing is that we've got some success with them, but we need to do them better. We need to evaluate them more thoroughly, and we need to get better at with providing information in more clearly accessible ways, really, and getting the message out there.
okay, so you two have got track record.
I am delighted that they have so proudly emphasised their track record with government, because it makes our argument for us, doesn't it? I mean, it has been an unmitigated disaster from start to, well, it's not even finished yet. The reason we are here today in this room is to discuss the continued unsustainability of our levels of consumption. We've had 30 years or more of these guys. It's not working. So what I would say to the government, my tip, change the questions you're asking, change the approach you're taking. It's time for a change.
Well, I was going to ask you, with your massive track record, do you work? Are you effective? Have you delivered results?
Oh, definitely. I think you'll find that when we ran our No to CO2 campaign a few years ago, loads of people saw that advert on television. When we did evaluations, when we spoke to people about it, loads of people had seen it, they thought it was really interesting, it had really affected them. How is that not impact?
I'm sorry, but I don't think that's really solved the problem. I mean, just watching an advert on television is not really going to change the fundamental problem here, is it? And I think that's the problem of your appeal. You offer a quick, easy fix to politicians who are looking at short timescales rather than the longer scale in which it takes to solve these problems, and that's why you're the go-to solutions. But really, you're not solving anything.
Not changing anything.
No.
Not solving anything, not changing anything. Strong words from this side of the table. But what's your track record, you two?
Well, you know, the Dutch are much more forward-thinking, and I've been talking to them for the last decade or so, and they're interesting people, and they're much more in many ways.
Let me help you out here. Despite years of unmitigated failure to reverse unsustainable trends in our resource consumption, policymakers like David Cameron, these guys' mate, and Amber Rudd, have been extremely slow to cotton on to what exactly we're offering. We are saying ask new questions. We aren't offering a quick fix, but we are offering a long-term sustainable fix that demands actual meaningful change. So I would say in my case, there haven't been any practical examples where, for example, the government has said, okay, let's take the ideas of social practice theory and put them into action. But at the same time, what the government is doing all the time represents interventions in practice. The way in which they're changing prices, providing information, road building programs, investing in new solar technologies. All of these represent ways in which we're trying to change the practices that people perform. The point is we need to bring all of this together into a coherent framework.
It's interesting you talk about long-term changes and long-term investments and long-term vision, because I suspect over on this side of the table you work with slightly shorter timeframes, perhaps not much beyond the next election, would you say? Is there a constraint on the kind of things you might offer?
But it really is the language of government and big business, and we're the people that they want to talk to.
I think we also work in the bigger picture and in the longer term. I mean, basically, if we look at the data, I would say that we're pushing an evidence-based approach. I mean, if you go out there and you start to ask people about some of these key issues that we're talking about here, the levels of awareness are quite low. And when we start to push out very well-designed communication programs, we see that awareness being raised.
This is complete nonsense.
And the other fact is that, as I mentioned...
Let me take a comment from this side,
Complete nonsense. Levels of awareness around climate change have never really been higher, but people don't change what they do. We have a very well-known thing, in fact, I think it was your lot that came up with it, called the value action gap. Lots of people have the right values, the right attitudes, they know what it is they should do, but they don't do it. So, change your tune, guys.
I think that's opened up the topic for discussion quite nicely. Are there any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Oh, fantastic. Please stand up and tell us your question.
What do you think of the government's sustainable consumption policies?
Ooh, good question.
They have a sustainable consumption policy?
Apparently.
Oh, okay.
Is that your short answer?
Well, I think ineffective and short term. I repeat myself, I'm afraid I have to do that. We want things to be joined up, we want longer term, we need to move beyond the soundbite and the short term fix. I'm really sorry. I can't say more than that.
Okay.
I'm quite happy with how things are going. I mean, they haven't commissioned a social segmentation model from me for a while, so I'd like to see them starting to do that again. We really need to understand the different kinds of consumers that there are in the UK today and the kind of dynamics there, so we can understand how to speak to people and how to tap into their needs.
Yeah, and as I said already, I think some really good progress has been made in terms of how the government are pushing out their sustainable consumption programs, but we need to continually improve that through making it more effective, but also innovate. I mean, look, social media has come about in the last decade in a big way. YouTube and these things. We really need to harness the power of these new technologies to actually really get the message out there. And as I was rudely interrupted earlier, I was just about to say that there is so much evidence around if we get the price right, if we're wanting people to change when they use energy throughout the day, so renewables is a much better solution and a possibility in our energy system, then incentivizing people to use electricity when it's actually at a surplus and not going to be wasted. There's good evidence from around the world that those kind of incentive structures actually work.
There is in fact very limited and extremely patchy evidence.
But there is evidence, and we are relying on evidence to make decisions here. And if we move forward and continually improve what we're doing, so I would say quite good so far, but room for improvement.
But if you don't think systemically about how to actually get those renewables into your system, then that's completely pointless. And I would say the government aren't thinking about that at all.
Well, I would the feed-in tariff, which I would have to say that I would disagree with Big Dave on this, because just scrapped subsidies into renewables, especially solar. Amazing example of if we get the price right and we incentivize and we give some subsidies to people, solar panels pop up overnight in many people's houses. Micro-generation, power to the people. This is what we're suggesting from this side of the table.
Okay, so sort of cautious optimism, perhaps okay and could do better on this side of the table. Disillusionment, I'm sensing from over here.
Not far enough, not fast enough.
Not far enough, not fast enough. Well, you heard it here first. Any more questions from the audience, please? Oh, fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, something I've always wondered is whether Lady Gaga would be a good celebrity endorsement for sustainable consumption.
Lady Gaga, would she be good a celebrity
Wonderful.
endorsement?
Excellent question, young man. Thank you very much. Of course, Lady Gaga would be an excellent champion for sustainable consumption. We've got a long track record of working with celebrities. So, for example, Leonardo DiCaprio, when he came to Live Earth, love Leo. Don't we all love Leo? And knowing that he has solar panels on his house and he really cares about the rainforest really helps you to make the case to other people that might be less susceptible to it. So I think if Lady Gaga gets her fans on board, such a huge fan base, lots of young people, it can only be a positive force.
So basically, people would copy her. They want to be like her. They would do the Gaga thing.
Yeah, it taps into their identity, their unconscious needs.
I mean, I think she's great. She's gorgeous, isn't she? And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a very efficient way of getting the information and the message out there, isn't it? I mean, one person who has so many Twitter followers, it's unbelievable. And, it's crazy. It goes up so much every day. Oh,
I don't think he's ever heard of her.
Maybe
you don't
not.
think he's ever heard of her?
It's an efficient way of getting the message across, and that's got to be a good thing.
Okay. And over on this side here, what do we think, Lady Gaga?
From my perspective, it would be a nice to have, but only if everything else had been sorted out in advance, and it risks being a distraction so long as meaningful decisions and discussions and ideas about how we're going to change the social practices we all engage in. So long as they're not on the table, talking to Lady Gaga is a waste of our time. We need to think not about persuading individuals to change, put more lights off or use not a plastic bag but a reusable cloth bag or whatever you might call it. We need to think instead about what's the direction of our practice in society, what is the trajectories that we're on and how can we change them. So Lady Gaga, she could be quite useful for changing the meanings of practices, but that's really, I think, her only role, and if that's done in isolation, it's just a distraction.
Okay, not a big fan then over here. Systems of provision.
Well, at an individual level, I am actually quite a big fan and consider myself to be a little monster. However, I don't believe that she does have any expertise in engineering or scenario planning or long-term forecasting, so for me, I'm afraid it would be quite a bad romance were she to get involved in sustainability issues.
Not even a flicker. Not even a flicker. You've
No,
never heard of her.
it's
Never
over his head, I think, over on the left-hand side here. Fantastic. Okay, so celebrity endorsement. Yes, but not quite sure. Any more questions in the audience? Yes.
Cycling is a great sustainable transport initiative. How would you promote it?
It's promoting cycling.
Well,
What do we think?
Should we
Very
just
good
talk
question.
about the successes and the evidence that we've got to go on so far? Because, I mean, if we think about getting the information out and also incentives, I mean, right here in this great university, There's a cycle to work scheme where you get a tax break, so you don't have to pay tax on the cycle that you buy. Fantastic, this scheme has been so successful. Loads of the workers here have used the scheme and have saved a third on the price of their bike.
Okay, so for you it's all about getting the prices right, sending those market signals to people.
Because it works.
Because it works, he says. Okay, any other takers?
Yeah, well, in my company in London, obviously I run a rather large marketing company, rather large, and we're part of DEC's carbon culture scheme that runs in public sector bodies and related bodies, and what we have is kind of teams of particular champions within the workplace, so they're working on encouraging people to cycle to work, to think about their commuting habits. They make a kind of game out of it and a competition. So obviously I don't cycle to work, because could you do that in these shoes? And it really wouldn't fit with my image, but I'm hoping that some of my lower down employees are gonna start doing that.
Yeah, okay, so cycling because it's fun, it's possibly trendy.
Yeah, and it's a kind of thing for the workforce and for them to do as a community.
For the little workers, for the drones, I see. And encouraging cycling over here, come on, let's hear different views.
Well, for me, I think, again, I sound like a broken record, but systems, hello, think about the system. Jesus. Right. I mean, the Boris bike, although, Boris, but we can think about the Boris bike system as a really good example of infrastructure that's been put into London, and the way in which there's bikes in different places, and there's a payment system, and you can see on the baskets are not very good, but despite that, it's a good thing. There's millions of journeys carried around on those bikes, and the way that particular model has been translated into lots. I go to many cities talking about this stuff, and there's those kind of bikes everywhere. So it's about changing the actual system of cycling and making it easier, more cycle paths, and even longer cultural change. It's not something that you just kind of make it trendy overnight by getting Leonardo DiCaprio pulling wheelies down the Mall or whatever,
Well, presumably you've learnt some lessons from your friends in the Netherlands.
Exactly. This is the point. They've been biking for years, and they're way ahead because it's so deeply ingrained into their culture and into their socio-technical systems.
Oh, socio-technical systems and culture. Practicing, do you have something to say?
I think everything that the panel... Bizarrely, I think actually there's been some good ideas here, but the trouble is that they're very much one-sided. They're all very blinkered. I don't disagree at all that it's a good idea to try and make bikes cheaper. I don't disagree at all that it's a good idea to try and make cycling seem to be an attractive thing to do. That is an important aspect of changing what it means to cycle in society, to make cycling seem like a normal thing to do. Similarly, I think it's critically important that we have good infrastructure in place, good cycle paths, good Boris bike schemes, or whatever else you want to call them. We also need training for children and so on in how to ride safely on the roads and in traffic and so on and so forth. But the point is, any of these things in isolation are simply not going to make much of a difference. We need to bring these things together. But I would say one other point. So as well as changing the elements, what practices, what cycling's made up of, and making that, promoting cycling's elements, we also need to think about the relationships between different practices. The reason a lot of people don't cycle has nothing to do with cycling itself, but to do with other practices like driving. They feel unsafe on the road. So as well as promoting cycling, we need also to start thinking about how we can decrease the amount of people who drive. And that's something actually that the London Congestion Charge, for example, has done very, very well.
Okay, so any final questions from the audience? No more questions from the audience? Well, then in that case, I think maybe that's all we've had time for this afternoon. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you very much. The sense that I get from you is that actually you're all interested in looking at the same problems, but you see them very differently, and you tend to come up with different solutions. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to tell President Cameron.
Change his approach.
Change his
Simple.
approach.
Change the approach.
Say hi from me and Sam can as well.
Oh, Sam can. She'll be pleased to hear from you.
And me as well.
And
sending my regards.
obviously, yes. I don't know if you know who you are, assistant.
No, I'm going back to the Netherlands.
Okay, so I think this has been a very productive afternoon. I've enjoyed getting to know you. Have you enjoyed getting to know them?
Yeah.
That's wonderful, because for the next 4 weeks in this module, we're going to get to know each one of them in a lot more depth over the next 4 weeks. But hopefully you will never erase these images from your mind. In particular, the tiara. So, thank you very much. It only remains for me to invite you to put your hands together and thank our guests.